thank you for joining me, everyone. It's always really nice to have lots of participants live. It sort of makes you a little bit more lively at my end as well. So I'm Becky Carr, for those of you that are new, or maybe this is your first webinar. And I tend to take some of the monthly webinars and we hone down and have a look at certain aspects of extended DISC and how to use it. So this month's webinar, in conjunction with good old Valentine's last week, we're actually having a look at the couples report. But before you say, oh gosh, that's all a bit romantic, we're also going to have a look at the workplace equivalent, which is a similar report called the work peer analysis. Now, literally, that compares any two people wanting to gain knowledge of how to work better together. Look, I know many of you use it already to assess workplace members, and I know many of our life coaches and therapists also use it, and in couples assessment or therapy. Whichever you choose to use, they are both great assessments that really invite discussions into things like similarities and differences. And it's laid out really easily for you to see and discuss in a really neutral, warm and friendly way. Usually, you know, valuing difference in an ideal sort of work peer or couple, we would like to think we make the most of their individual strengths and of course, you know, truly value others' differences. But the reality is often very different, as you know. You know, conflict can erupt from the way we filter communication, attitudes to doing activities and projects, you know, views on things like teamwork, just being under pressure, taking risk, even things like dealing with change. These differences between two people can often be quite subtle differences, or, of course, very large differences in the way that they see or view those things I just mentioned. And either of those can really hinder our expectation and cause things like friction, avoidance, and frustration. So look, on the couples side of it, you know, energy spent dwelling or constantly arguing over these differences in our personal relationship, though fairly normal, can end up leaving both sides drained of energy, resentful, and a bit upset. So that's why the couples report and the work peer analysis can be helpful in providing the necessary information about ourselves and others so we can develop better interactions and become more successful together. So, you know, as you know, a big majority of this sort of journey starts with an awareness of self first and then awareness of others around you. If you aren't aware of others, or how they might prefer to function in, say, different situations, then we can easily mistake or, you know, take others' actions or intentions very wrong. So look, I'm not here today to do any coaching on the subject, but I'm sure, you know, I have to say it's really illuminating looking at some of these things like blind spots and how we overuse our strengths, especially as a couple or a work peer. On the slide in front, I have something that you would have probably all seen or used yourself, and it's the Johari window. And, you know, I find that really useful for setting the scene, getting people to understand about blind spots, open, hidden, and unknown, before I even start using the paired or the couples assessment. But again, that's totally up to you. That's just a thought or a tip that I tend to use myself. So a good example of this is when, you know, a person might be intent on getting the task done. And funnily enough, I had a consultant ring yesterday to say, you know, gosh, this person went ahead and did the task, for example, and the other one's feeling very left out and devalued. So when I talk about task, I can mention that it's at home or work. You know, we have activities and tasks to do at home as well. Drop the kids off, pull, you know, doing the cleaning, all the rest of it. So let's say this person, they go ahead and they start planning and doing it to a point, let's say work related, where they might forget to get input from the other person. So on that person's side, they're happy that they've taken the initiative and just got started. You know, they just do it. They might think that to themselves. So on the flip side of that, the other person's view, you know, the same action, they feel that the person has been insensitive and they're feeling incredibly devalued because they're not a team player. They haven't actually asked this person for any of their ideas and thoughts and innovative or creative thoughts about how to go about doing it. So therefore they start to withdraw or they get angry. So what one person's perspective is get in there and do it, the other person is, hey, how should we do this together? That's enough of a little conflict. So we often fall, all of us, into autopilot mode, especially when we're around, say, familiar people. So we can get a little bit less aware, should I say, or use our radar a little bit less often as the familiarity kicks in. Sometimes this is okay, and, to be honest, sometimes it's just not. So let's go back and just have a talk about the adapting part of extended DISC. As you know, DISC does focus on behaviours, not so much your experience or skills or values. So basically it can help identify our most comfortable behavioural style so we can understand how we prefer to operate, make decisions, communicate, etc. It allows us to understand each other's hardwired behaviour, especially things like similarities and differences, like the one I just mentioned before. Being a little bit more prepared with what to expect or what to even look for can often lead to a little bit less room for misunderstandings to creep in. And again, just to reiterate, that's why we use this type of profiling as well. So I just want to note, I understand we are who we are. There's no need to change who we are as a personality, but we can control how we might interact with others. So both in the workplace and in our personal space with our partners, we can choose whether to modify or not modify our behaviours to be more effective when it comes to completing projects or connecting with clients, or in our personal lives with even showing affection or communication in the right way. What we can't control, as much as some of us would like to, is the behaviours of others, but we can be aware of them, and this is obviously where the couples and the work pair analysis can come into play. So what's in it? I get asked quite a lot. Well, having been Valentine's, I'm going to start with the couples one first. So I've been lucky enough actually to have quite a few couples that have taken part with me in what I call the couples insight session. I have to say it's incredibly enlightening for all of us, but obviously both of them, as we go through scenarios, functions, preferences, learning styles. But the most important thing is that I guess it invites really good, robust discussion. Okay, sometimes fairly robust discussion, but there's a good amount of laughter and renewed understanding too. So just let's have a look at the couples assessment, as I said, and then we'll have a look at the work pair afterwards. So the couples assessment literally combines 2 DISC profile results into one report of usually 2, dare I say, romantically linked people. It identifies various similarities and differences of the relationship between these 2 individuals, but in a whole lot of different areas. So the results present quite a concrete information in the context of who they both are, but in comparison to each other. So I think the important thing here is that it's delivered in such a way that it's very non-judgmental, and there is no better or worse or good or bad styles to which a partner does something better than another. The purpose of doing it this way is to provide unbiased information on how each other prefers to do things. Our patterns of behaviours we tend to use first. We can then further our appreciation of each other's similarities and differences by making decisions on how to modify ourselves in that situation effectively. Because let's face it, we need to modify ourselves differently in different situations, even with the same person. So, early in the assessment, you will find that both the individual partners' natural DISC styles, as you see on the slide here, are shown. Now, this is their natural profile too, is shown in the assessment first. At this stage, they haven't actually, we don't actually put this particular standard format, we don't actually show the profile 1, because the talk or the synergy is about the similarities and differences if they're natural. This is quite, I find it's quite a neutral chat because it's a way that you can introduce the four main styles and their personal, I guess, their personal choices, and naturally discussion does tend to evolve. The next page of the report then combines the flexibility diamond. So you see that down the bottom here on my slide. And this can be linked together with their own profiles. So obviously the flexibility, the two bits of green you see on my slide here are indicating each of the people where they're mapped. You can see these particular people tend to have a lot of symmetry up the top there and the sort of task or CD, DC area. So there's a lot of similarity there with their flexibility scope. Look, just a note, if you want some help with debriefing some of the stuff that I've just been talking about, please don't forget there is debrief webinars and documents for debriefing, your DISC reports or each individual page on the VIP pages at HR Profiling. So I won't be going into how to actually debrief the individual bits today, that you can get that off other webinars that we have done. Okay, so the report then takes us to the next page, and that starts to talk about relationship styles. So the behavioural competencies shown on this page shows us how our natural behaviour tendencies has a tendency to align. Many of you will already know that these competencies that I've got shown here are not a can or cannot do measurement at all. And it's really important that you stress that to your client or your staff member or couple or partner. So instead, it tends to be natural for them if it's on the right-hand side, and not as natural if it's on the left side. The left means, hey, I might do it every day, no problem, but it does take me a little bit more conscious thought, energy, or effort to implement that particular behavioural competency. If it's really far left, like a -4 or -5, it would be true to say that these would be competencies that this person would probably have a tendency to avoid unless they really push themselves to do it. If it's really not quite natural, we're getting a little bit out of your comfort zone here. So you would have to find a way to make it comfortable to use. So in this particular section, it shows, I guess, their top 7 natural behavioural competencies. You can see there under Donald Banks and Alan Barnes, I've got here, there's the top 7. So instead of being compared to, say, pre-chosen competencies, this page actually allows the algorithm to determine the top 7 selection from a multitude of competencies. Now, I can tell you this leads to some great discussion about preferences in a relationship. Sometimes I get, overlaps on some of the top 7, and other times there are no particular ones in common at all, pretty much like this one. It does not mean anything bad at all, or good, no bad or good. In general, I do spend a fair bit of time on this page though, going through each of the partners' top 7. Get them to share some stories or examples where some of these competencies have actually shown up in their relationship before. This tends to be a really positive page and a really good one for setting the structure of your session with them anyway. So let's have a look at a few of these other pages. So going through the report, because I want to make sure that you feel a little bit more familiar and, able to or want to use it. So the report then looks at the communication style, including other headings like, the way each person tends to listen. These pages are used as a comparison, and they do actually use pre-chosen competencies this time. So as you can see above, under each of the competencies is the people's names, and you can see there that there's a scale for each person. The work pair analysis tends to provide us, first of all, a very common language to talk about our communication styles, how they both prefer to give and receive information. Their communication style can come across, quite differently to different people too. And, different people have a different understanding of what will help them make adjustments and how to interact with others. So for an instance, if you happen to be a D, I'll just keep it with the 4 main ones, I think be easier. If you happen to be a D style talking to an I, You'll probably get right to the point, and you can come across as being fairly demanding at times, quite direct with your communication, at times a little unyielding. If you're an I talking to a D, for them, you might come across a little bit too chatty and not focused on results. So while we use this in the workplace to use some of these words, it is very usable when it comes to outside the workplace and our personal relationships. We can still be direct with our partners. We can still be quiet and bite our tongues, So I think we spend half our life doing that. So the report has also images, as you can see on the slide, of communication and of the different styles, and basically some very generic tips. So I guess for me, I just wanted to remind you too that, like all the behavioural assessments, the couples assessment can be customised by you. And an option here, instead of say diagrams, is to probably show some implied tips or improvements in certain areas that you can actually pull out from your tips report. So don't forget, in the tip report, that is a report that's just full of a whole lot of ideas, thoughts, development areas in different aspects. I know some clients have actually pulled pages of that and put it into their couples report, because whilst these diagrams are fantastic to look at and still great discussion points, they're more sort of from a generic point of view rather than from a dynamic, absolute, down to the 5% increments sort of thing. And obviously you can do that, and it sort of aligns to what you need a little bit more as well. Okay, so let me keep showing you a few other things. So the next section takes us to look at, say, understanding each other better. I won't go through every page, but there are at least another 3 to 4 headings and competencies, like things like decision making, initiative, openness, planning and adaptability. And I have to say that helps you delve a lot deeper into how each other tick and what we prefer to do as partners. Also, the back of the assessment, of course, is what we call the worksheet page that you can use with your client or staff member, for example, or your partner. And you can fill out everything while your mind's fresh in a coaching session or a therapy session, or however you decide to use this. Of course, again, this is customizable as well by you, so you can make it a little bit more aligned to how you tend to or want to coach a couple. So interestingly enough, I find this report works really well when also coaching parents versus kids. Look, I probably shouldn't say versus, but you know what I mean. Parenthood is hard enough, so insights like this can help explain a few things to frustrated parents and upset teenagers. I've used it quite a few times. Just bear in mind that the child should be around 16 plus. Okay, so that's a bit of a brief review of the couples assessment. You can kind of get the idea. There's decision making, and it goes through how you may vary. Things like initiative and openness, planning and adaptability, which I've mentioned. You can start to see that if, on my slide here, Donald making well thought out decisions based on security, he's a 2. And Alan needs to be 3. So you would want to discuss that type of thing. Is it something that does come up? Is it a frustration, or is it not something that is a big problem? Okay, so we're going to have a look now at the work pair analysis. Now, these are for people that are not linked on a personal or such a romantic level, but still want to know how they can work better together. Often we get selected for our positions at work, but we have no control over who we report to, or who our colleagues are at the time, or who's in our team, or even who we manage. And even if we do have control over the hiring process, it doesn't mean everything will go smoothly, all because you hired them or selected them. So the paired analysis, I'm just shortening the name down for the sake of this webinar, is very useful in many situations. So even down to when 2 people who are contemplating setting up business together, or two individuals decide to work closely on a specific project together, you can actually get some wonderful insights before you even start. So you can highlight where there might be things like overlaps of strengths, or both might try to be avoiding a particular area. And I found that interesting because, you know, designating or delegating certain activities in a startup, you want to be able to cover a fair few of the bases. And if they're both going to start avoiding those areas, how do you implement it? You know, so what I call dividing the project. So another area that I frequently use it in is, of course, is recruitment and selection. So situations like comparing the potential candidate, if I've shortlisted them, and their future manager, or to maybe others in the team that they might be working with as well. So the candidate's usually done a report anyway, because part of the recruitment is that they would do a disc report, but then I turn it into a work peer analysis, and I make sure that I click their name and click their manager's name. And I have to say it's very insightful for both, but it helps me if I'm going to be part of the process and help to get them on board correctly. And the other one is obviously the manager wants to know, you know, what does it look like? So I actually tend to run it every time as part of my own onboarding program. You know, this way, as I said, the new inductee will be understanding themselves and what to expect. But as I said before, you know, potentially the leader has an idea about what kind of ideal environment this person wants, what kind of expectations they have of them as a manager. And, you know, are they the type of person that needs a lot of scheduling or written emails, or do they just need a good old chin wag in the morning and hello, and, you know, so a little bit of camaraderie. I know it sounds kind of superficial, but those types of things are the things that help us stay really engaged at work. The other thing that I find it really helpful for in onboarding is also learning styles, understanding, you know, how the person learns or want to learn, and how I can create or make their induction a little better, smoother. You know, potential knowledge in any of these areas enables managers to prepare themselves better, and perhaps a little bit more planning or tolerance in certain areas during the onboarding process, if they know that that's how it potentially could go. So the applications of the work peer analysis, there's quite a few. You can see them up here. So mentoring, for example, so the ones that I've just mentioned before, I'll go back over those. But so in mentoring, where we tend to use the work peer analysis all the time. Well, basically because you can actually see how the fit might be. So let me just start by reiterating what we've been through, and I'll add mentoring to it. So onboarding, as I mentioned earlier, or part of leadership preparation, expectations of managers, team, or the candidate. So of course, when it comes to project management and choosing who might be a good fit with, you know, who in the team could be a good fit, I mean, this stuff can be gold when it comes to aligning people. You know, tasks can be delegated to the best natural fit where possible. Another big area is actually conflict resolution. Being able to show people visually their differences, and using something so neutral like this analysis can be a good way to get some leeway with gaining things like tolerance of each other, or a plan forward and how to deal with it. As I said before, mentoring, especially in choosing the right person to complement your behavioural style. Perhaps, you know, you're looking for someone with a similar thinking pattern, or perhaps completely opposite you, to push your boundaries in thinking. I know many of my clients that have mentors, and they've run paired analysis like this with their potential mentor, and some of them have actually said, look, I don't feel it's a good fit because we're too similar. Others have said, hey, we're similar, this is a great fit, you'll think like I do, and you might, you know, push and hold me accountable. So of course that's up to you. So personally, I use this to give me insights in my coaching sessions as well. I often run a report, or for me, I tend to use the open preview, so I can see the information online. For those of you that don't know what open preview is, you might want to find out, because that way you don't necessarily need to print half a tree to find information. Now I do this open preview and things. So obviously, so I can prepare to coach the person for me in the right way for them. So I need to be prepared depending on how they might be different from my natural coaching or training style. So the last one, as you can sort of see up here, is things like succession planning. You know, I know a fair few clients of mine actually, I guess, use it to seek a similar style of person to the one that might be, say, retiring, for example. But I also have clients that use it to analyze what they don't want a repeat of going forward. You know, perhaps it hasn't worked out for them with a particular type or style of person, and it's caused a fair few issues, and they might want to be avoiding this type of thing in the future. Maybe they've changed the company's strategy for the future, and they need a different type of person that can push a little bit more out of the box, and they have maybe what I call just fresh thoughts. So, you know, both the couples assessment and the work peer analysis is designed for both individuals to be involved in the process. But again, it's up to you. Sometimes it's safer to have to go through this sort of report at different times with different people. But they both need to know the dynamics or the results of it for their relationship to flourish or connect better or be more effective. You know, think of this as a work in progress with the information. And I have to say that it's really valuable time for yourself as a consultant or manager, for example, to truly be a facilitator of the information in this assessment. As I said, there's no right or wrong, there's no good or bad. So to come through and actually assess the differences with people in an unjudgmental way is just so important. So just a note on the technical side of all of these reports or producing these reports, of course, the questionnaire that they are answering is the same as the standard ones that you would ask them to complete in any behavioural assessment. So it will take 10 points per person, and then that's individual, and it's simply clicking on their names and combining it to a work peer or a couples report. I often get asked the question, goodness, you know, Becky, where's the best place to start with all this? You know, don't make it complex. Like anything, you know, time spent explaining the disc styles is pretty important because that gives you a really good structure and them a really good understanding of what on earth or how on earth they even got these letters to their name, you know, DIS or SISC. You know, however, after that, the profiles, as usual, are a pretty good place to start. So you can show them how it looks side by side with the other person. Funnily enough, I tend not to mention at this stage any sort of special cases present, as that often leads to getting a bit sidetracked. So if their profiles are, you know, particularly tight or the position of it is very elevated, for example, with stress, I do tend to come back and visit it, but I come back and visit it in a time frame where it might be a little bit more suitable. The other thing, I guess, for you is to review, compare their disc styles, but then I guess some of them are going to be similar, some of them are going to be different. So take some time to talk about the attributes of their styles. You know, this often sets a very relaxed scene and it starts to bring in that common language that I talked about before. I could go on further about so much more in these reports, but I sort of feel today making sure that you have an understanding of work, and as I said, excuse me, it can be parent-child one. And there is the equivalent report in the workplace as well, and that can be used, as you saw before, for a variety of different reasons, like recruitment, succession planning, you know, how you're going to coach them, for example, conflict resolution. Probably one actually I didn't mention, and I just remembered now, is annual reviews as well. Being able to produce one of those, the manager to the staff member or subordinate, those types of things can also be very insightful. So everyone, we've come to the end of the webinar. I feel like, as I said, an overview like this with a few key applications and points about using either of the assessments might clarify a few things or even motivate you to feel a bit braver to use the couples report. Remember, the tool is about our self-awareness and our awareness of others. So it's a really good opportunity to gain a better understanding of each other in a safe setting with a neutral information. If we can learn to appreciate these differences and uniqueness each of us bring to the table, then a myriad of things will go a lot smoother. Or at least we can be more prepared with what might actually happen or, roll out. So the work pair analysis and the couples assessment is designed to put our behavioural preferences into context so we can better understand who the other person is, how they differ, and actually how we might adjust ourselves effectively in certain situations to build better connections. So I'll leave it there, but thank you for joining me, and we'll be doing another webinar, of course, with a brand new topic next month. Don't forget that if you do have any questions that you would like to fire off, or if the work pair or couples report's not in your accounts, for example, you can get in touch with HR Profiling on the shown email just there. And if there's any particular questions that might be a little bit stray, then Kelly or one of the girls there will email and I can potentially add some information. Hey everyone, thank you for listening. I appreciate it. And this will be up in the VIP pages probably within the next, it should probably be next week, around about Tuesday or Wednesday next week. Great, thanks everyone. Appreciate it. See you next month.